I'm going to go over how to create geometry from curves. And when I'm using curves, oftentimes I will have a reference image. So I'm going to go into one of my side views, one of my orthographic cameras, come up to View, Image Plane, and Import Image. And I have a reference of a vase. I can move my image plane around. This is not a perfect orthographic image of this vase because it's an actual photograph. So the bottom that's curved right here should actually be flat. So you do have to make a few adjustments, but it's not difficult to do. And I'm also going to have it more or less symmetrical in my world. Obviously it's not going to be perfect because it is not a perfectly symmetrical object, but it is close enough. And I'm going to go up to Create, Curve Tools, and I'm going to use the CV Curve tool. And when I'm creating something from a curve like this, I just want to do half of it. I want to trace half of the silhouette and ignore the other half. It does not matter if you do the left or the right. You just need to pick one and not go over that center edge. So I'm going to start in just to the right of that center edge. And if I hold down Shift, I will be locked to make a perfectly straight curve before I click. And I'm going to bring it roughly to the end. It does have a pretty sharp change in direction. So I'm going to have a few points put down there so it can actually support that very sharp corner. I have two more control points here, and you can always go back and edit these points later. It is much harder to add more points in the middle of a curve than it is just to extend a curve. I'm just going to be putting down a fair amount of points, but not too many. Just enough to keep that nice shape. And then here, there's another very sharp change in direction. So I'm going to put down one point where it starts to change, one right in the center, and then one when it goes in the other direction. And then I can continue up. Then this vase obviously has an interior. You can make the entire interior of the vase. You'll have to get a little creative since you don't have a reference. Or what you can do if you know that you're not going to need to see the inside of it, you can just end a curve here, or you can have it cut off. So I have a little bit of it being double-sided, and then it will stop right here. If you need to see the whole thing, you'll just be able to trace the inside of the curve, but I'll leave it like this and hit enter. If I go back into my perspective, I will have a curve right on top of my image plane. I'm just going to move this back. And here is my curve. I'm going to turn this into geometry by using something called a revolve. And a revolve will take this curve and rotate it around an axis and put geometry everywhere that it would be spinning. You can do so by going to Surfaces, and 3 down we have Revolve, and you need to make sure you open up the options box. By default it will look like this, and if I hit apply right now, I'll have something that looks really good. However, if you right click on it, you'll notice you do not have any faces, vertices, edges, or anything that looks familiar. This is NURBS geometry, which we are not doing. So if you see this symbol in the outliner, the kind of like squiggly rectangle, that is a NURBS. So you would need to delete it and reselect your curve. For a revolve, to get polygons, you just need to change output geometry to polygons, and then choose control points further down under the tessellation method. It will by default give you quads. Now when I hit apply, it will not look as good, and it will be black most of the time. To fix this first issue of it being black, all you have to do is come up to Mesh Display and Reverse. That will flip the direction that the faces are oriented in. If we zoom inside of the vase, you'll see it's gray on the inside. So you need to reverse that, and that's Mesh Display and Reverse. If you hit 3, it will look a lot like the NURBS surface, but you'll be able to actually control the faces and vertices. You do have a few other options here. Segments are how many up and down segments it will have. So I have 8 faces going around to make a circle. If I change that to 20, I'll have a much higher poly vase and it will look much, much better. And now this is just normal geometry that you could use all the other modeling tools. So you can extrude and bevel like you normally would. When you close this menu, it does save your settings. So if you did make some drastic changes, make sure you set them back to defaults. And it will also save the control points and polygons. One more tool in the Revolve, you have your start and end angle, and that's just how much of a full 360 it will make. So if you type in 180, it will only give you half of the revolve. That's the Revolve tool. It can be a really, really powerful modeling tool to create objects very quickly. Another very nice feature of modeling with curves is that you can change the curve and then update the model as well. So let's say you already had your geometry, but there was something you didn't quite like about it. You can very easily go back to any camera view, and with the curve selected, hover over the gray and go to Control Vertex. And when you change a curve, the geometry will change along with it. It will always be symmetrical, so you can't change just one side of it, but it is a very nice tool to go back and update things later. If I move the curve, my geometry will get bigger or smaller. And if I delete it, unlike a deformer or a lattice, it will just stay in this shape. If you want to move a curve without affecting your geometry, select your geometry and make sure you delete your history. There's now no connection between the curve and the geometry, and you can use this curve to make a new shape. So if you're making a lot of different vases or wine glasses, you could very easily use the same curve, modify it a little bit, and do another revolve.